I spent a lot of time checking out Scars of Honor recently, and I wanted to sit down and give some honest thoughts on it because I know a lot of MMO players have suddenly started paying attention to this game lately, especially with a lot of people from the Ashes of Creation community looking around for other games to follow after everything happening there. So for anyone who doesn't know, Scars of Honor is an upcoming MMORPG being developed by Beast Burst Entertainment. It's been in development for quite a while now. It had a Kickstarter years ago that didn't fully succeed, but later got outside funding and continued development. Recently, they wrapped up a technical alpha test, and that's what we spent quite a bit of time playing. And before we go further, I need to stress this part because it matters a lot. This is an alpha, a legitimate alpha. It's not one of those early access, but basically released situations. This thing is extremely early. Bare bones in a lot of places, systems missing, bugs everywhere, stuff broken. So everything I'm saying here needs to be viewed through that lens. But even with that in mind, I do think there are some really interesting ideas here, and also some pretty major problems. So let's talk about it. The best thing in Scars of Honor right now is the talent tree system, and it's really not even close. This is something I really hope we start seeing more MMORPGs borrow from ARPGs. Instead of having these tiny little talent rows where you pick one out of the 3 abilities and call it a day, this game has a huge node-based talent system. It's a massive tree, tons of paths, and tons of choices. For this alpha test, everybody started at level 16 with 33 talent points to spend. And even with 33 points, we barely touched the tree. Like maybe a tenth of it. That immediately creates build diversity, and that's something MMORPGs have honestly been missing for a long time. A lot of MMOs today pretend they have customization, but everybody eventually runs the exact same build because there are only a handful of meaningful choices. Here, it actually felt like you had to think about what you wanted to become. For example, we played the Druid first. The Druid is clearly intended to be more of a healer class, but because we weren't really grouping with people and this alpha was mostly solo testing, we actually built our Druid more offensively. We took talents focused on damage instead of healing, and honestly, it worked surprisingly well. Was it a top-tier DPS compared to the Ranger? No, not even close, really, but it was viable. We could actually fight with it and make it work. And that's the kind of flexibility I love seeing in MMORPGs. The Ranger build we tried focused heavily on crit and armor penetration. The Mage had this really interesting Phoenix damage setup that we experimented with. So while the classes themselves aren't super impressive yet, and we'll talk about that later, the talent system absolutely has potential. Now, balancing this for PvP, that might become a nightmare. But from a gameplay perspective, it's pretty fun, and fun matters. Let's talk about what I think probably needs to have the biggest improvement. And for me, the biggest issue was crafting and harvesting systems. Right now, they're frankly just awful, like genuinely awful. Every gathering profession has its own little mini game, and instead of making the process more engaging, it just makes everything tedious and frustrating. Fishing especially drove me crazy. Fishing should be relaxing. It should be something chill you can do while talking to friends or watching streams. Instead, I'm fighting input lag while trying to keep bars lined up with fish movement mechanics. And after 2 hours of that, I'd be exhausted. I'd frankly quit. And crafting wasn't much better. We were literally trying to make a single piece of food, and eventually I gave up entirely. I understand what they might be trying to do here. Maybe they want professions to feel more interactive. Maybe they want anti-bot mechanics. Maybe they want gathering to feel skill-based. But right now, it just isn't fun. And honestly, if this system launched the way it currently is, it would probably be a deal breaker for me, personally, because I really liked life skills in MMOs. I enjoy harvesting, I enjoy crafting, I enjoy slower progression systems. But this system made me want to stop doing professions entirely. I really think they need to completely rethink these systems from the ground up and frankly just start over. Now, something else I wanted to talk about outside of the talent system and the crafting and harvesting was classes. They honestly at this point feel pretty generic. While the talent system feels like it's going in a good direction, I really couldn't connect with the classes that I had, at least in this alpha. Currently, there were only 4 classes available: Paladin, Mage, Druid, and Ranger. We tested everything except the Paladin during the stream, and I did go back and retest the Paladin later. And the issue is a lot of things simply weren't functioning properly yet. Buffs weren't working, skills weren't applying correctly, some spells clearly did nothing. For example, the Druid had this seed ability that was supposed to apply a debuff and later explode for bonus damage, except the icon never showed up. The effect wasn't applying correctly and it just seemed broken entirely. So it's honestly hard to fully judge the classes because parts of them simply don't work yet. But even with that understanding, nothing about the classes currently feels revolutionary or especially unique. Hopefully that changes over time as the trees get expanded, abilities are polished, and class identity becomes more defined. Because right now they feel very standard MMORPG. The other thing I wanted to touch on briefly was this idea of faction-based open world PvP. Now, apparently they've already started to address some of this with a PvP toggle. However, I think that only came about after the CEO kept getting spawn camped. But the fact that they put it in is hopefully a good sign, because what happened during testing for us was exactly what always happens in these systems: spawn camping, griefing, players killing lobies repeatedly, people just frankly being jerks because they can. And look, this is not unique to Scars of Honor. We've seen this in many other games. This just seems to be what happens with forced open world PvP. Not everybody behaves badly, but enough people do that it becomes a problem for everyone else. Personally, I really hope they keep optional PvP toggles in the game. I'm fine with dedicated PvP zones, rotating PvP areas, battlegrounds, faction wars, but forced PvP everywhere, I don't think that works well long-term for most MMORPG players anymore. I know there is a niche group that really wants this, but even those people tend not to fight each other. They tend to spend most of their time looking for other people that won't fight back. That kind of stuff just gets really old really fast, and personally I think it's a way to kill your game. The last thing I want to talk about is maybe going to be one of the more controversial takes I have, but honestly, I really think this technical test should have been under NDA. I genuinely do not think this build was ready for public exposure. And the problem is, once people form an opinion about your game, it's really hard to undo that opinion later. I saw tons of streamers and viewers talking about this almost like it was a newly released MMO instead of a very early alpha. People are already judging it, and the game simply is not ready for that yet. You did not need tens of thousands of players for this stage of testing. You could have done this with a few hundred NDA testers and probably got the same technical information without damaging first impressions. And honestly, the Steam numbers kind of reflect that concern. They reportedly handed out around 40,000 keys, but when you actually look at concurrency numbers on Steam charts, the peak was only around 1,400 players. Most of the time, it hovered closer to 1,000. That tells me people are logging in and then leaving almost immediately. There were 4 servers that were supposed to hold around 500 players each, meaning total capacity should have been around 2,000, and they never really hit that. At the end of the day, Scars of Honor is still extremely early. There's a lot that needs work. Movement feels clunky, tab targeting doesn't always work, auto attacks sometimes feel stronger than actual abilities. Some systems barely function, and skills break constantly. But there is one genuinely exciting idea here, and that's the talent tree system. I really think that kind of ARPG-inspired character building could be something MMORPGs need more of going forward. So we'll see where the game goes from here. Maybe 6 months from now, it looks dramatically better. Maybe a year from now, some of these systems are actually pretty awesome. It's the reality of alpha testing. But right now, there's potential mixed with a lot of warning signs. And honestly, that's probably the fairest way I can describe Scars of Honor today. I appreciate y'all watching, and I'll see you next time.